But it's not just the Alberta wacko separatists who are putting out this "come and take us, Big Daddy Trump. We want to be part of, your dystopian golden age," whatever the hell they think's going to happen to them.
A better question would be, why do Albertans feel like they have no other choice? And you're calling them wackos? Girl, you need a trigger warning to walk out your front door. And did you perhaps stop to think that it's because of deranged leftists like you who support politicians who are actively destroying the fabric of Canadian society? Oh, and guys, did you know that Charlie and Laura are pondering the idea of starting a Vive la Resistance against good people like you? I wish I were kidding.
I don't know. I'm thinking that we need something like a Canada, defense, a Canada
Civil
vow.
War or vow?
Yeah, and that the Canadians agree that they're going to sign up. I will defend my country.
But we're going to get into that later. Now, I know that I made a video mocking Laura a few days ago, but I think her minions came and mass reported my video, which got it partially restricted. I know, boo-hoo, cry me a river. I really don't care about that. Today, I'm going to prove why people like Laura and her special guest, Charlie Angus, who I can only describe as, well, he's like that weird neighbor who peeks through the blinds, waiting for someone to walk on his grass and then calls the cops. I upload videos almost every day exposing the left in Canada, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss an upload. If you enjoy my content, let me know by hitting the like button. Now let's get right into it.
I mean, that's not exactly how these dictator invaders do it. They don't pay you well for letting them take you over. It's not going to go well for them. But it's not just them. Pierre Poilievre couldn't help himself but run out of the gate and say, "Oh, Trump, way to go, America, whoa, woo, well done." And also, put in the democratically elected leaders, but down with socialism.
Actually, the quote was, "Congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. The legitimate winner of the most recent Venezuelan elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, should take office along with the courageous hero and voice of the Venezuelan people, Maria Corina Machado. Down with socialism, long live freedom." I wouldn't exactly say that's fangirling over Trump as you insinuate. He was expressing gratitude and professionalism for Trump removing an unelected dictator who was doing harm to innocent people in his country. And actually, I believe that this is something that Pierre and Trudeau would have agreed on.
Canada calls upon the countries of the world to support a holding of new, free and fair presidential elections in Venezuela. We call on countries of the world to support the interim president, Juan Guaido, who is interim president based on the Venezuelan constitution itself, that says since there is no president right now, the international community having widely condemned last May's presidential elections as being illegitimate and unfair, means that the actual president of the National Assembly needs to step up according to their constitution as interim president to be able to stabilize democracy there and hold free and fair elections as soon as possible. Countries around the world are rallying to defend both the Venezuelan people and the Venezuelan constitution, and Canada is pleased to be part of the Lima group that has worked on this and towards this for the past 2 years. In regards to refugees and people fleeing this ongoing humanitarian crisis that is solely the responsibility of the brutal dictator Nicolas Maduro, we will continue to look at all different ways Canada can be supportive of Venezuelans who are fleeing this terrible humanitarian crisis.
It was less than a year ago that the former Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, said, "Maduro's shameless actions demonstrate that democracy and the rule of law cannot be taken for granted. We will not tolerate the erosion of the democratic process or the repression of citizens seeking to express their rights." Hell, Laura, even Mark Carney, the dude who you call Canada's dad, said, "One of the first actions taken by Canada's new government in March 2025 was to impose additional sanctions on Nicolas Maduro's brutally oppressive and criminal regime, unequivocally condemning his grave breaches of international peace and security, gross and systematic human rights violations, and corruption. Canada has not recognized the illegitimate regime of Maduro since it stole the 2018 election. The Canadian government therefore welcomes the opportunity for for freedom, democracy, peace, and prosperity for the Venezuelan people. Everybody seems pretty aligned on this, Laura. Regardless of Trump's motivations, what you're actually advocating for is to allow the Venezuelan people to suffer in silence. The real reason you're so bent out of shape over this is because you support socialism. The capturing of Maduro represents a broken cog in your leftist propaganda machine. It delegitimizes your stance on socialist policies because if they were so great and amazing, then why are the people of Venezuela celebrating? Here's a fact for you, Laura. Socialism and socialist policies have directly led to the deaths of over 100 million people. If you spent more time reading books as opposed to Twitter posts, perhaps you'd learn a thing or two. I highly suggest you read The Black Book of Communism. Might be an eye-opener.
Well, he looks like an utter fool because not only is the world condemning what Trump did, it's a breach of international law, which of course we should be protecting as a democracy, but it also, he's kept the regime in place. He hasn't got rid of the regime. He hasn't done anything to take down socialism. And you've got other members of cabinet, Polyev, all trying to double down and triple down on this. I mean, what is your take when the leader of the official opposition of our country looks as though he's in line with the tyrant who is threatening to take our very country from us? I mean, it's not just unserious to me, it's wildly dangerous, and it looks like he wants to be governor of the 51st.
That's an interesting take. Pierre Poilievre's slogan was Canada First and Mark Carney's was Elbows Up. Pierre's slogan represented bringing the promise of the Canadian dream back to our country, and Carney's slogan was fully constructed around an American. Pierre Poilievre visits communities throughout Canada, and Mark Carney claims to be European. Carney sat across from Trump a few times and looked weak, fragile, nervous, and intimidated. The left labeled Pierre as a sloganeer, but ironically, Carney's movement became nothing but a slogan, where Pierre's became a light at the end of the tunnel, which was snuffed out by radical leftist ideologues who are morally irresponsible. Pierre's goal is to build relationships, not destroy them. The Liberal campaign was built entirely on fear, and Carney easily manipulated people's Trump derangement and then utilized that rhetoric to secure a victory. There wasn't a collective sigh of relief the day he won, and judging by the way you and your brainwashed liberal gremlins with no souls have been acting, you're not exactly thrilled with how things are going either.
Well, I think what's really concerned me, and it was, my last year in Parliament watching how the right, Pierre Poilievre, I mean, they totally paralyzed Parliament. They turned it totally toxic, completely ignored the need that we were facing an existential threat to our sovereignty, and we had to step up. It's one of the reasons that I sort of broke ranks, even in my own party, that we had to start putting our nation first. And, Poilievre, the guy he doesn't have a security clearance, or he can't get one. This guy's never had a real job.
How the hell did Carney step up to Trump? Explain that one to me. I don't remember seeing Mark Carney go face to face with Trump and call him out for anything. Really, he sat there, he smiled nervously, and looked like a little boy who was being lectured by his dad. And you're still going on about Pierre's security clearance? Why do people get so fixated on this? They never ask why, they just throw out the term with no context or explanation. These crazy leftists seem to be more terrified of someone who is a born and bred Canadian than the Chinese Communist Party directly interfering in Canadian elections. Pierre never had a real job. Charlie, what exactly have you done in your life to benefit the people of Canada? What is a real job anyway? Is it a 9 to 5? Is it a real job for you to sit in front of your camera spewing BS about our country?
I think what we're watching now is that the Conservative Party of Canada, the party of Joe Clark, the party of Stanfield, the party of Diefenbaker, is now this clown show run by a frat boy who will say anything, do anything, and has made them irrelevant.
A frat boy? I see what it is now. You were that kid in college that nobody wanted to be friends with, aren't you? You were the loser who made friends with teachers instead of students.
What's dangerous about this is that this is a moment where Canada needs to step up. And I think the situation in Alberta is concerning because, that Pledge for Canada is amazing what they did, the door knocking. I'm going to be out in Calgary and Edmonton. We see such great grassroots resistance happening. And yet Danielle Smith has played to the separatists again and again and again. This woman has undermined our nation, and you don't get to play games like this, not when the other side is looking for any excuse. I've been calling her Donbass Danielle, because that's what happened in Donbass, right? It doesn't matter that the group who are this tiny group, Jason Kenney says there's not more than like a couple of thousand of the max, are losers.
Right.
Putin didn't care that he was dealing with losers in Donbass. What he needed was an excuse.
Alberta independence isn't a threat, and you correlating Danielle Smith with the loss of civilian life is more than a stretch. It's a gross mischaracterization of what she said. Did she say, "Let's go, Alberta, let's take this province by force"? Or did she actually advocate for the people of her province to be able to have their own voice? And so what if it's a tiny group? Which it isn't, but it's kind of hypocritical because didn't you say before that trans people deserve to be heard and fought for, even though they only represent 0.19% of the Canadian population? Well, you stood in Parliament to fight on their behalf, so why can't people advocate for the rights of Albertans who feel that they are being marginalized? Oh, that's right, they're conservative. Which is exactly what your argument boils down to. Zero intelligence.
So this is a moment when the threat to our nation has never been greater, and we have to, all of us, look at the big picture. And it's like 1939 and where Canada was and what we need to do to be very clear. And I do want to say that the world is watching Canada right now. The world thinks that Canada is standing up. The world thinks that Canada is the leader of the free world at this time.
I'm glad you brought up 1939, Charlie. In order to validate your fears, you need to reach back 87 years in the past. Are you that upset that Nazi fascism doesn't exist in its true form anymore? Or are you trying to conjure it back into existence? It's always leftists who love to bring up Nazis. I'm starting to think that you guys like them or something. How many leftist protests do you see where they have a swastika drawn on a piece of cardboard from Dollarama that cost a deranged liberal the last $4 of their welfare check? I mean, they do cross out the symbol, but I bet they get some sort of sick pleasure out of drawing that thing. Many even wear the hammer and sickle too, so if anyone has shown an affinity for Nazi socialism, it's liberals. And I only have to rewind the clock back a few months to show the result of that. So for a boomer such as yourself to intentionally mischaracterize people wanting independence from a government that systematically beats down hardworking people is very immature and disgusting.
So, Polyev, grow up. Daniel Smith, shut up.
Yeah.
Our nation matters more than your toxic games, because those toxic games are the things that would undermine us in the end.
Grow up, shut up, stop playing toxic games. You are a former MP, Charlie, and this is how you get on? You say that Pierre never had a real job, but maybe you think that way because you didn't take your job seriously. You didn't have the passion to help people. You only have the passion for radicalizing them.
And Canadians instinctively knew that if Polyev, can you imagine if he'd won the election? We'd be part of the 51st state right now. I don't think there's a Canadian after seeing his comment that don't believe that that's the case.
If Pierre won, we'd be the 51st state. You guys love to float this speculative scenario constantly, but I know why. You're upset that Carney is the one pushing us closer toward the prospect of becoming the 51st state with his grossly incompetent economic policies. The ones leading to job loss and companies leaving us for the US. You're angry at Carney and you're taking it out on Pierre. If Carney is doing such an amazing job, why are you still talking about Pierre? Shouldn't you be bragging about all the accomplishments that he's made so far? Based on your pre-election rhetoric, you should be saying, "I told you Carney would secure a deal with Trump," or "I told you that Carney would unlock more jobs for Canadians." I never hear you praise Carney for his achievements because he hasn't made any. He's had discussions about possibly making deals that might happen someday, maybe, if this and that happens, but nothing of any significance. Oh, but his budget passed! Yeah, the equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot because of fear-mongering NDPs and a drunk climate activist. And for the record, just because you passed an exam with a 50% doesn't mean you're the best candidate for the job. That's a DEI philosophy which is rooted in rewarding participation trophies to losers.
I think we need to be looking at the Citizens Defense Force as a grassroots, set at the local level, set at neighborhoods, making sure that we have people who are ready to go out and check on their neighbors, say there's an emergency, people who are going to get trained up in drones, people who are going to get trained up in helping search and rescue, people who are willing to step up. I don't know, I'm thinking that we need something like a Canada, defense, a Canada
Civil
vow.
War or vow?
Yeah, and that Canadians agree that they're going to sign up, I will defend my country, .ca, something like that. And what can you do? How can you help? It is a huge undertaking. But I think this idea that we're going to run this from the top down and it's going to be military and blah, blah, no, it's going to be at the local level. That's where the resistance is going to happen. That's where the resistance is happening.
A Citizens Defense Force? Can you imagine? Charlie Angus leading a neighborhood watch. Check on your neighbors in case there's an emergency, like someone misgendering them on social media. You guys are beyond parody and it's almost hard to fathom. And I just checked his YouTube channel and he's calling it Canada's Citizen Army. He's imploring citizens to sign up and defend our country. Charlie, you and your brainwashed liberal friends are the last people that would do anything for Canada. Leftists are cowards who operate in the dark under cloak. They rely on policymakers to stop people from speaking out. You don't engage in open dialogue because you're afraid that the answers will open your eyes to common sense. And you can barely talk about defending Canada without stuttering. You're shaking in your seat even thinking about getting out in the thick of things to defend our land. During a crisis, it's people like you that hide in the crawl space. Laura is fully on board too. She's ready to get out and support murdering American citizens. How else are we supposed to interpret this ex-post? A user said, "My husband told me the seniors at the curling club were talking about the US threat to Canada, saying that if the war comes, they'll be the suicide squad taking their weapons to the border to shoot as many Americans as they can. People are anxious but resolute. They will defend Canada." To which Laura said, "Wow, since today's O Show aired, I've had over 500 comments of Canadians willing to fight for our country, many seniors and youth. I hope Mark Carney understands that 1 million of us would sign up to a citizens' army if given the chance." My God. Now that is a sight I would love to see. Laura leading an army of 70-something-year-olds with walkers toward the US border. All the Americans would have to do is say men can't get pregnant and then you'd all self-destruct. Liberal tears would flood the nation like it's Armageddon. Well, at least Canadians could actually breathe a sigh of relief because our suffering would finally be over. But seriously, please start your own coalition of freedom fighters. I want to see what Carney's army looks like in full mobilization. Well, maybe not fully mobilized, but a crippled mobilization. And then you could call your movement, Elbows Hurt.
It doesn't mean we're going to be marching up and down the street in formation or forming militias. It's about creating that web so we're no longer isolated. We're no longer afraid. We know that our neighbors got our back and we've got theirs. And again, then we become unbeatable. Nothing can stop us.
Charlie mentioned during this waste of a half an hour of my life that we need to stand up and fight the resistance. And I totally agree with him. I'm going to continue to point out the outright derangement and hypocrisy of these clowns every chance I get. I'm not going to let you get away with poisoning impressionable people in Canada. I doubt any young people watch you, but if I can stop you from radicalizing our youth, I'm gonna fight for them. They don't deserve to be brought up in a country where privileged narcissists like you tell them they need to be afraid for their lives every day, fear the white man, and condemn conservatism and traditional values. Laura, you don't do anything for Canadians. Nothing. You make zero difference in the lives of a single person in our country. Charlie, you are the textbook definition of the type of boomer I'm referring to that's destroying our society with your ideas. It's inevitable that you will both fade into obscurity and be remembered not for standing up for Canadian values, not for championing those who don't have a voice, but a prime example of what happens when you drink the Kool-Aid.